Welcome back to the program. We're live on Channels TV and from the economic capital of Nigeria, Lagos. Now we'll give attention to the NASD OTC. The market made public its Q2 earnings or Q2 performance, the numbers made public this period. The OTC grew in size and structure in the second quarter of the year. At the end of the quarter, 28 securities traded on the NASD OTC as against 26 securities in the previous quarter. The securities market capitalization stood at 437.17 billion naira, represented by 110.73 billion shares in issue, out of which only 17.23 billion shares are dematerialized. Over to the FMDQ bonds market, we see average yields across benchmark bond instruments rising 0.3% from 14.1% on Friday to close at 14.4%. Following increased activity on July 2034 and March 2036 instruments. This comes as investors tried to free up liquidity ahead of Wednesday's Debt Management Office primary bonds auction. The total subscription at that PMA was 232.1 billion naira, while total bids ranged from 10% to 17%. And quickly, we'll switch to the T-bills market. Average rates in the Treasury bills market also trended higher than last week's levels as markets reacted to the stop rates at the primary market auction, in addition to the system liquidity levels which we saw during the week. Now, the Lakwashiru of Lead Securities, and I have been looking at the industrial sectors of the market, but now we'll be shifting our attention to the conglomerates and the consumer goods. Of course, the conglomerates is a subsector under the consumer goods, and that is where we have a lot of the FMCGs. Give me your thoughts about this sector in terms of performance during the Q2 and generally what you're expecting from this sector going forward.
Yeah, the consumer goods sector will continue to face challenges for obvious reasons, and many of them are already looking at local alternatives to the inputs for their products. So I'm also seeing them, the ones that have an exposure to foreign facilities, will try and convert those facilities into naira denominated facilities. It makes sense. So if I'm ever an exposure in dollars, I'll try and make it naira, because if you borrow in dollars and you pay back in naira, it's challenging. So the best thing is to convert all those facilities into naira, so it'll be easier for you to pay. And we also see a lot of them also looking at ways to also come up with value goods for their consumers also. You understand? So maybe some of them will start looking for from premium goods, they'll start creating value goods so that they're discounted and easy for consumers to buy.
Some of these companies, like you said, like you agree, have started diversifying. I know that the bottlers, for example, and the brewers have been acquiring some kind of cassava plantation to see how they can diversify and diversify their materials and shift to the cassava value chain. How do you see this impacting on their performances in the near future by the time this is actualized?
Okay, I'll give you an example of a company called Sab Miller, and they have a brewery in Anambra State, and they produce a lager called Hero, and that lager is basically a major component for that lager is cassava. So it's a discount beer. So in the brewery sector, you have premium beers. For example, if you look at a bottle of Star or Gouda, you see premium lager beer. You understand? It's for the high-end market. Right. But a beer like Hero in Anambra State is basically a regional brewery, and it's feeding the local market there. So you can see a lot of companies start introducing discount products for the lower chain in the end user value chain.
Okay, but the likes of Guinness to have some peculiar products now, but that doesn't seem to have impacted on their performance, on their prices, so to say.
Yeah, I understand the point you're making, but Guinness hasn't really explored to the fullest the discount market. Nigerian Breeze, for example, has done that. You understand? So by the time they took over consolidated breweries in Ijebu, for example, they got the 3-3 franchise, which is popular within the Ogun Oyo axis. So that's all. But I'm sure Nigeria and Guinness will start looking into that space very, very soon.
Okay, so by being forward-looking, toward the second quarter of this year, we know that a lot of things changed. We saw partial deregulation of the fuel, the PMS or downstream petroleum sector. We also saw the introduction of the flexible exchange rate policy. Do you think this will shape things better in the Q3?
It means that most of the headwinds you mentioned have been addressed by the federal government.
Right.
For example, the initial petrol scarcity, FS scarcity has been addressed to a large extent, maybe not as fully as we want it to be, but this current FS regime is better than the one that we had a few months ago. And also concerning revenue, the government has started indicating they're going to start spending more. The economy is in a recession, and the only way we can get a recession for the government to start spending. So an expansionary budget will solve that problem. So I'm looking at a better H2 for quoted companies than H1. And I'm looking at major signs of recovery in the economy next year.
People still have a lot of concerns about the FX markets. The state of things at the spot market, it looks like the activity there is still limited. Do you think that because a lot of these companies, like have been channeled to the futures market for their demands for dollar, and if you look at what the futures market has to offer, it delays your duration of getting the exchange.
Yeah. A lot of people have been arguing that the flexible exchange rate is not as flexible as it should be, but it's better than the old one. But I'm sure that CBN will continue to address these issues. For example, for the past, initially, you find that interbank, it was always 280 something naira.
Yeah.
But right now, it has moved above 290. You understand? Under normal circumstances, the difference between the FX market and the interbank market should not be more than 10%. But we're seeing like a 20-30% difference. And CBN is aware of this, and they have to bridge that gap.
Thank you so very much, Dolapo Ashiru, CEO at Lead Securities. We appreciate your attention here. And that's all the time we have on the show this evening. We'll promise you another package next time. I'm Temple Ashaju, and it's bye from me now.